Okay, people, you ready to take a trip to the Cold War with me? Fuzzy hats are not required. I just thought this looked cute, and I'm cold. Also, look, real hair. Didn't feel like wrangling the wig for this one. Should I get some vodka? Do we have any vodka? I should show you this. This is like an apple kind of moonshine that is made in Chernobyl, or made from plants that grow in the exclusion zone of Chernobyl. So that's cool, right? I'll leave it for Blingles. So, this video is about another movie that I watched a lot as a kid that most people have never heard of. But this one's a little different. This one has bad Russian accents, it has children with guns, it has jetpacks, and it has the most hallmark ending that any movie about two super aggressive world powers could probably ever hope for. I touched on it at the start of my last video, the pirate movie video, but now I really need to share this with you in its entirety. And I'm not going to go too deep into the background stuff this time. Like, I'm not going to dig into the production, anything that went wrong, anything that was particularly weird. Not really. I just need other people to know that this movie exists. So strap in, because you're here now, comrade. So I said I wasn't going to do any background, but actually for this we kind of need a little background about the Cold War and like the vibe of the 80s. Otherwise, none of this is going to make sense. So here is a super quick overview of the geopolitical picture at the time. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Please don't get mad at me if I leave your favorite Cold War factoid out. You can just put it in the comments if you want people to hear it. Okay? Okay. During World War II, the US and the Soviet Union were allies against Hitler and the Axis powers. But after World War II, the Soviet Union started occupying territories in Eastern Europe. They put up the metaphorical Iron Curtain, which in some places was an actual wall, to divide those territories politically from the rest of Europe, and then the US and the Soviet Union basically had a 45-year standoff. It was capitalist America versus communist USSR. Both of these superpowers had nukes, and both were very aware of what would happen if an actual nuclear war broke out. Nobody wins these things. So they just stared angrily at each other for decades. During that time, they fought proxy wars in Asia. They had a space race.
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the left.
They spied on each other a lot. They developed bigger and better arsenals, and they made a whole lot of propaganda. They also had a couple of near misses for actual war, but fortunately none of those led to a nuclear strike that would probably have killed everyone. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was in trouble. Oil prices were dropping, economic growth was stagnant, and people were constantly trying to get from the Eastern Bloc to the western side of Europe where things were, more capitalist. Mikhail Gorbachev took over the USSR in 1985 and started a plan of economic reform called Perestroika, which basically redirected resources from building up the military to helping the civilian sector. He made foreign investment a thing, he relaxed production quotas, he increased freedom of the press, and he tried to cut down on corruption in the party by making the government more transparent. And most of all, Soviet citizens could now have more contact with the West, especially America. This was good, mostly, and it really drove an interest in the Western way of life. People who'd grown up behind the Iron Curtain were really curious about what the other side was like, and they were determined to find out. Change was inevitable at this point. Once American consumerism gets its claws in you, there's no going back. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. This was a big concrete wall that divided East Germany and West Germany, and it had been a symbol for the divide between Eastern and Western Europe for a long time. Less than a year after the wall fell, Germany reunified, and a revolutionary wave rolled across Eastern Europe as many of the Eastern Bloc countries overthrew their communist leadership. Most of them did this peacefully, but Romania executed their head of state, so, good on Romania, I guess. Back in the USSR, McDonald's opened its first Russian location in 1990, and a year after that, the Soviet Union collapsed completely. The power of Ronald McDonald is unparalleled, even to this day. So the USSR was no more, a whole lot of stuff happened after that as the dust settled, and here we are today, mostly. That's the Cold War in a nutshell. For Americans, it was a really tense time, and Russians were the ultimate baddies. Communism was terrifying. The Red Scare was real, and paranoia was whipped up by politicians like Joe McCarthy, who pretty much convinced people that there was always a chance that a commie bastard lived right next door to them. A Russian invasion could happen at any time, or so most people thought. The media of this era reflected this too, especially the movies. Monster movies were frequently about invasions or body snatchers, the idea of not knowing if your neighbor is really who they say they are. Hello, Joe McCarthy. Movies about terrorists or war had antagonists with Russian accents. Movies like Red Dawn, which came out in 1984, were directly about Soviets invading the US, with ragtag groups of teenagers ready to stop them with guerrilla tactics and good old-fashioned American gumption. In all ways, Russians were the bad guys in Western culture. So that basically sets the stage for this movie, Ruskies, which came out in 1987. This was a family movie, rated PG so kids could enjoy it, and it was more or less milking the last bits of conflict between the US and the Soviet Union. The Cold War was on its last legs, but there was still time to make a fun family film about Russians invading, right? That's great for kids, right? Right? So let's talk about Ruskies, because I watched this movie so much as a kid. This was one of those movies my dad taped off HBO and put on the VHS shelf. Of course, none of the geopolitical stuff made any sense by the time I was watching it, but that's okay. Kids don't care about that stuff. Kids are dumb. I was a kid and all I cared about was the silly montages and jetpacks. So I rewatched this movie a few weeks ago and oh my god, what a ride. Also, I feel like I should mention that even though my dad was the one who taped this thing and put it on our VHS shelf, he never actually watched it. I did a call with my parents like a week or two ago, and I mentioned that I was going to make this video about Ruskies, and my dad was like, oh, I never watched that one. And I was like, the hell? Like, what do you mean you never watched that one? We watched the hell out of this when we were kids. My mom had seen it, but he just never sat down and watched it. So I said, no, you guys should probably see it. Yesterday I got a text from my mother. She said, we watched Ruskies. Your dad finally watched it. It's exactly as bad as I remember. And I was like, yeah, that tracks. So anyway, this movie is a whole thing, so let's dive in together. We open with some ridiculously long credits that are just red text on a black background. That's pretty ballsy of them. I mean, this isn't the Hunt for Red October. They really trusted that people would sit through this. Also, Whip is the lead's first name. Whip. I love that. He was in Top Gun, actually, as the character Hollywood. And also, Leaf Phoenix. Leaf is actually Academy Award-winning actor Joaquin Phoenix. For a while as a kid, he apparently renamed himself Leaf because his siblings had names like River and Summer and he wanted to fit in. But then he went back to his birth name in the early 90s, which I think that was a good call. This movie also has Ralphie from A Christmas Story. My parents always call him the shoot your eye out kid. I'm glad he had other gigs outside the holidays. Okay, so we open on the three child main characters reading a super graphic comic book about American heroes killing foreign agents. That's fun. High fives for the violence, woo! These kids live on Key West, and at least two of them, Danny and Jason, are military brats. I'm not sure about the other one, Adam. His parents seem kind of preppy. But either way, they all live on the island, and they all go on and off base whenever they want and read Sergeant Slammer comics, so these are our protags. Offshore, there's a Russian surveillance ship, and can I just say how close to shore this thing is? There is no way the Americans haven't picked up on this boat sitting here. Here we meet Misha, a Russian radio technician who translates American radio signals, but apparently he listens to the ones on like 103.5 light FM and not like military radio transmissions. Misha and a couple other Russian guys get into a raft to go to shore because there's someone waiting for them there to give them some sort of military device. We never get any details on what this device is or how this guy got in touch with the Russians in order to sell it to them, but all that matters is that it's an American military device, and they want it, and they go out in the storm to get it. Their raft capsizes in obviously shallow water, and they somehow get separated. The guy with the device pieces out after like 5 whole minutes of waiting because I guess no one could have survived that storm, right? Now, the backstory on the kids a bit. Danny is a child of almost divorce, and when I say almost, I mean they are signing the divorce papers today. What are the odds? So he repels out of his house to avoid any contact with his parents, which... relatable. He goes to Adam's house where they attack each other, and Adam's parents just sort of ignore it, I guess because they're so used to it. See how normalized the violence is here? Must be those comic books. Next, there's Jason, and Jason's dad is terrifying. Like, I thought my dad was scary, but if this was my dad, I would never step a toe out of line ever. He looks like he might actually kill his child and make another one that can follow orders. Jason takes his life into his hands every time he disobeys this man. So, we've got Lower Keys Naval Station, which I don't think is real. I think the only base on Key West is Naval Air Station Key West, but maybe it used to be called Lower Keys or something? I don't know. And I don't really feel like Googling military base names from the 80s. But yes, there's a base there, so that part is real. Also, it's the 4th of July soon, so we get all this American theming everywhere, really driving home the point that this is the USA and we fully embrace that red, white, and blue, baby! People are setting up for what's apparently a parade, but just kind of seems like a sad little halftime show. And a guy in a jetpack appears, which surprises the kids. Now, there's zero chance a guy in a jetpack this loud could sneak up on anyone ever, but these boys who are super into military stuff and you'd think would have some sort of situational awareness are totally caught off guard by the engine strapped to the man right behind them. Also, the guy is apparently branded as Sergeant Slammer, the comic book dude that the kids love, and they were just saying how they wanted Sergeant Slammer to be in the American celebration, and I guess they didn't notice that big Sergeant Slammer van down there on the field next to where the jetpack guy lands. This is as good a place as any to mention the casual homophobia in this movie, and probably a lot of movies from the 80s. The number of times these boys use the word homo as a slur toward each other is not good. It's enough that you really notice. Lindsay Ellis, in her video Stranger Things, It, and the Upside Down of Nostalgia, notes that when Stranger Things was made, they didn't make the kids authentic to the 80s, even though the show is set in the 80s, because authentic 80s kids would be a lot more homophobic and racist and just generally shittier than we would be okay with in a TV show in modern times.
The past as depicted in Stranger Things is a very 21st century kind of place. There is, for instance, little of the casual sexism or racism prevalent in Western society before 1990s political correctness kicked in. In a lot of ways, they don't talk and act like 80s kids because then they might come across to modern audiences as unsympathetic.
And yeah, now I get it. These are authentic 80s kids in an authentic 80s movie, and they are pretty shitty. So yeah, they say homo, it's meant as a bad thing. They also say eat shit and die, but at least they don't go for some of the even worse slurs of the time. Because this is still a family movie, right? For kids. So the kids take their boat, which is called PT-109 because that was the boat JFK commanded when he was in World War II, and they care about that for some reason, even though they don't model anything else off JFK. And they get ready to go to their hideout, which appears to be an abandoned bunker. But Danny finds a book washed up nearby, and it's Russian! Dun dun dun! So they talk about Russian stuff on the way to their hideout, including how they would happily turn in their parents to the KGB for being mean to them. What the hell is wrong with these kids? I mean, I get being annoyed at your parents, but I've never in my life wanted to send either of my parents to a Siberian beat mine. That's pretty fucked up. I don't like these kids. They get to the hideout, they find a torn Russian raft there, and now they're like, something's up. And it's obviously a Russian invasion as far as they're concerned. They're pretty excited about World War III breaking out, but they need to alert the adults. So Adam and Jason go back and leave Danny to secure the island. Danny pretends to be part of an actual military unit, which is honestly pretty much what you'd expect a scared kid to do. And he finds Misha in there. Or rather, Misha finds him and pulls a gun on him. Adam and Jason have very little luck convincing the adults that Russians are invading, and I'm not sure why they started with Adam's older sister, who clearly hates him in true and appropriate big sister fashion. Adam's popped collar dad tries to figure out what's up and connect with the kiddos, but he's understandably skeptical about a commie invasion, which causes a whole "you just treat me like a kid" forced conflict that, believe it or not, will sorta come back around later, but not really. Misha starts calling out Danny for the comic books about killing Russians, and did Russian kids not have comics about killing Americans? I don't know anything about Russian child propaganda, but if they didn't do that, they missed a huge opportunity. Danny tries to make a run for it by pushing on Misha's obviously dislocated shoulder. Misha pulls him back with his good arm, and Danny gets a bloody nose from I can't figure out where. Misha just pulls him off the ladder and Danny ends up bloody. I guess this is visual shorthand for the war has started. They get into a political argument that turns into a moment of connection over the crappy comic books. The other kids come back, Danny breaks free again, and the kids get the gun. So now Misha is the prisoner with actual children holding him at gunpoint. Look at that terrible trigger discipline, Jesus! The kids do that lying to each other's parents thing to pretend to stay over at each other's houses. Jason leaves a note for his dad that's signed, "Your son Jason," as if there's any other Jasons in this household. Maybe there are, I don't know. And Danny lies to his freshly divorced mom to emotionally manipulate her into letting him off the hook for a family weekend. Like, my God, this mom makes me so sad. Fuck Danny, man. Danny also goes to his dad's trailer to get a tape recorder. He was clearly going to just take it, but his dad is there, so he asks first. Then he asks his dad what he would do if a Russian washed up on the beach. His dad is very clear.
Kill him.
Dad looks rough. Like, if you watch this, you're going to worry about Danny's dad. Or what he might do on this, the day of his divorce, given that he has access to guns and doesn't seem to be in a good headspace. But he's not the star of the movie, so away we go. Meanwhile, Adam is guarding Misha, but Misha has to pee, so he hops his way outside. Adam unties his hands at some point, he doesn't run away, and then I guess he and Adam are buddies now? Look at that trust. Jason and Danny see a nice big boat on their way back to the hideout. We will call this Chekhov's yacht. Adam and Misha play cards and teach each other their languages, and it's honestly a cute moment, which of course the other kids immediately ruin. Danny has zero trust, and who can blame him? The kid is going through some stuff and appears to be getting no support for any of it. But like, studies show that being nice to prisoners instead of torturing them is a lot more effective for getting them to comply with requests. So maybe Adam is just a masterminded interrogation, and go fish is his kindness of choice. Danny asks why Adam didn't ask Misha what he's doing there, and then for some reason they just skip waiting for an answer and cut straight to the kids going through their supplies. If the kids brought any water back with them, they don't give it to Misha, but they do give him a huge bottle of vodka. They seem to think this will loosen him up and make him talk. Misha offers some to the kids, Jason tries it and spits it out, and then the interrogation starts. Misha talks about being a radio tech and not knowing anything about politics. He describes the raft capsizing in the storm. He says his friends are gone and his ship is gone and he's alone. Misha has perfect hair and is very clean for a shipwreck victim, and he talks about trust a lot. He waxes poetic about missing his amazing, wonderful family, and of course that triggers broken home Danny. Danny generally objects to kindness or trust of any kind, and he tends to yell his objections instead of, speaking in a normal voice, but the other kids mostly ignore him. I guess they're familiar with Danny's trust issues already. Misha throws back more vodka and starts singing in Russian. Adam and Jason both drink the vodka, and can I just say that there is no way a kid can drink crappy vodka straight from a bottle like that unless that kid has been practicing for a while. And they drink so much, Jesus Christ, what is this? They do get sick after, but honestly, the consequences seem pretty low for this level of child booze consumption. Danny doesn't drink, he just broods in the doorway and then appears to sleep on a pile of driftwood outside for the night. We get a short cutaway to the second unit, the other two Russians who actually did survive the shipwreck. They're stealing clothes from a golf store and they run when the alarm is triggered. The kids talk about what to do with Misha, and Adam doesn't want to turn him in. Here is where we find out that Adam's dad is not military and didn't even fight in Vietnam. When this movie was made, the end of American involvement in the Vietnam War was about 14 years earlier, so I guess that tracks for the ages of these kids' parents. But Danny and Jason act like Adam's dad not being in the military is the worst thing ever. Conscientious objector is said with even more vitriol than homo. Adam tries to say that his dad totally wanted to go fight in a Southeast Asian jungle. You guys, he really did, but he just had bad knees. Then he gets pissed and storms off. The other two Russians show up at the house of the guy who tried to give them the device during the storm. I have no idea how they knew where this guy lives, and this movie doesn't care to tell us. They just knock on his door. The guy is American, and it's implied that he's in the military, and he's also a traitor. The Russians have guns in their golf bags and threaten him, but they can't understand each other, so haha, translation book that doesn't really work. Misha was the only one that spoke English in that group. The traitor says he's changed his mind, the device is back on the base, and it'll be operational in a few days. Again, we have no idea what this thing does. Gun to his face, and cut. Don't worry, they didn't shoot him, although I have no idea why not. I guess because blowing someone away would ruin this movie's family-friendly rating. Back to the kids. Misha's dislocated shoulder is a problem, and they're trying to fix it. They decide to take him to the hospital because Adam's sister Diane works there, but it looks like she's a candy striper, which is an old-fashioned term for a hospital volunteer who doesn't actually treat patients. Candy stripers bring people water and stuff, maybe help with paperwork, but they don't have any sort of medical degree. Anyway, Diane and Misha have a moment. She agrees to treat him, even though there's zero chance she has the credentials or knowledge to do that. And why is there a copy of War and Peace in this hospital, just sitting in a drawer in an exam room? Anyway, they use the book to pop his shoulder back in, and the movie just acts like his arm is totally fine after that. I get why it does that. This is a kid's movie, but I've dislocated my shoulder and it hurts like a bitch for quite a while after. Also, the more times you do it, the more likely it is to happen again. Don't dislocate your shoulder, kids. What follows is a montage of Misha experiencing America. Now again, remember, at this stage in the Cold War, the USSR was in a rapid decline, and Western culture was already entering the Soviet consciousness. But this is a fish out of water story, and Misha's the adorable communist fish thrown into the Western consumerism for the first time. Their first stop on the montage circuit is McDonald's, of course, for product placement, and Misha says it tastes like America. Danny is a wet blanket who wants to turn Misha in, but the kids decide to handle it democratically because America, and they take a vote on what to do with him. Majority says don't turn him in, so the montage kicks off, and I can't figure out why they spend so much time buying him clothes. He had clothes on when he washed ashore, and he was wearing one of the kids' t-shirts in the earlier scene, and it seemed to fit him just fine. Also, where are the kids getting the money to dress him? Who's paying for this? Does Adam have his dad's credit card or something? Misha sees the setup for the July 4th celebration, and they say it's about the American Revolution, which fascinates him as a concept, but then is never spoken of again on screen. I like to think that the writers were trying to imply that they planted the seeds of revolution in Misha's head, and so when he goes back to Russia, he will somehow create a revolutionary atmosphere, lead a group of rebels, and overthrow his own government. But, subtext. Danny's enthusiasm for the montage waxes and wanes. He seems all in on the dressing montage, and he dances with the others on the bridge, but he's pouting at the batting cages, which I kind of find realistic. A real kid would probably try to stay mad, but accidentally have fun when he's not paying attention. I was a kid who pouted a lot, and in retrospect, that shit only hurts yourself. Anyway, they play some arcade games, and then Misha hugs the boys, and they ask if he's a homo. Hugs are apparently only for communists. We American kids don't express affection, which is how the founders intended it. The kids recoil at the hugs, and then the montage continues with mini golf and a photo booth that Danny's forced to participate in. When it's all over, Misha gushes about how great the day has been, how he loves freedom, how he's woke now. Well, he says he's awake now from the sleep of communism, I guess. Then the two kids with attentive parents leave to go lie to their parents again. Danny explains what divorce means to Misha, which I hope is just a language issue and not because Misha's unfamiliar with the concept. I don't know. Was divorce allowed in Soviet Russia? I mean, I don't care enough to Google it, but let me know in the comments if you have the knowledge. Now we meet Raimi, a military asshole who's just cartoonishly evil in every way, which of course is required in kids' movies, so we know who to hate. He's caught a ray, but it's not good to eat, so he just tortures it for a bit, and I remember this being really hard to watch as a kid. I know it's not a real Ray, but poor Ray. Fuck Raimi and his friends. Of course, Misha runs in there and saves the Ray, and there was a crowd standing around and not a single other person was gonna do something. This movie has officially made the Russian guy more likable and empathetic than any of the Americans we've met so far. Raimi is pissed and he starts trying to fight Misha, and Jason yells, "Misha, hit him!" as if that wouldn't start a fucking war on the spot. They start pushing each other, but the MPs show up and drag Raimi off. No idea who called them or why they're there, but it genuinely wouldn't surprise me if they just sort of follow Raimi around to make sure he doesn't accidentally murder civilians or something. We find out later that Raimi's in charge of security on the base for at least some of the time, so there's that, I guess. Misha realizes he has to turn himself in because this whole thing is a big mess and a potential international incident, and meanwhile, Adam's dad has taken the time to actually look at the Russian book the kids, I guess, left with him, which was super dumb of them, and now he does believe a Russian invasion is coming, or at least something is up. Jason goes home to his dad and is ordered to do yard work, and Danny, still hanging out with Misha, sees Chekhov's yacht again and has a big idea. But before he can even tell Misha about the big idea, they run into Danny's dad, who has come into town to do some day drinking in a different setting. Danny tries to get Misha away. Misha wants to meet Danny's dad for some reason. So Danny runs and Misha sits at a bar next to the dad and just looks at him awkwardly. This whole sequence feels very shoehorned in. You sort of find out later why it matters a little that these two meet, but the meeting itself is a lot for a kid's movie. So here's how it goes down. Danny's dad drinks with Misha, who never says a single word out loud. It takes about 30 seconds of sitting there for the dad to start telling a story about being 11 years old in Hungary in 1956 when the Russians rolled into his town and destroyed his life. You realize during the story that he's got an accent, and he talks about his dad throwing a rock at a tank and a soldier coming out of the tank and killing his dad. All this was completely unprompted. This guy is just telling the story of his dad's death at communist hands to a random guy in a bar. Danny's dad has no boundaries at all. Also, Danny apparently didn't know any of the story either, so he and Misha go stand in a doorway together, and Danny grudgingly lets Misha put an arm around him. While all this stuff at the bar is happening, the two other Russians are literally just sitting outside the base, and they happen to look in, where the device they were there to get just happens to be. It's on a truck, in broad daylight, marked SurveilCon for ease of identification. Now, any normal person in the situation would be a lot more concerned with getting home, or not getting caught. But these assholes are going to finish the mission if it kills them. If it does, that'll happen off screen, because children are watching this. Cut to Danny's mom and sister. Surprise! Danny isn't really with their dad. The sister rats him out just out of the blue for no reason, because the plot needs to get moving right now. Buckle up, viewers. We're getting a zoom in on Adam's dad's face as he's told that something is awry. Jason overhears his own dad getting a call about something fishy going on, and there's no way Jason heard this call with the lawnmower running right next to him. But whatever. He runs off and tells the kids they're screwed because the parents are all talking to each other, which any kid knows is a terrible thing. But now it's time for Danny's big idea. They're gonna steal that nice yacht from before and take Misha to Cuba. Cuba is only like 90 miles from Key West, and that would be a reasonably safe place to leave a Russian sailor to get some help. What tickles me about this movie is that there's now a montage of the kids planning the trip, and they are really good at planning an ocean voyage. They're checking the navigation charts, getting weather reports, sneaking on the yacht, and covering every base in the hours leading up to executing this plan. Seriously, good for them. So many kids' movies have kids who are kind of stupid, but good things just happen to them. Or kids that try something super dangerous that they are completely not prepared for, but it works because, plot. But in this case, they seem to know their stuff, and I will give points for that. They even know to go buy snacks for the trip, and we get Misha being surprised by the American grocery store. Can't have a foreigner in America movie without the big grocery store eye boggle. The parents get the kids' tape recorder, and they start to circle the wagons. Adam's dad says he's calling the president. So, what does this man do? He's a civilian, but he appears to work on base. They have a nice house and cars and a golden retriever, and what is his job? I kind of have to know. All right, stuff is about to really kick off, so settle in. Take whatever disbelief you have, suspend it way up there, and just leave it there to die. You won't need it where we're going. The kids decide to tell Diane about the Take Misha to Cuba plan, and what the fuck, Adam? Did you just pour chocolate milk into a soda? What is that? Are you gonna drink it? Are you insane? Anyway, abomination beverage aside, the kids know that everyone's looking for them. They know their parents found the tape and the gun, and Diane agrees to help look after Misha while the boys get ready. Danny's parents, who just divorced the day before, remember, reconnect over the fact that their son is missing and probably dead at the hands of Russian invaders, and then the parents all head out to search for the kids. The Russians hide in plain sight reading Playboy and Pravda, the Russian state paper, while martial law appears to be declared. Hey, soldiers, if you're looking for Russians, maybe check the guys reading Russian media at the newsstand. And Misha and Diane make out on the pier, because of course they do, it's an 80s movie. Somehow the Russians wander their way onto the fishing pier and they see Misha, but the kids rush him off while Diane agrees to run interference with their parents so nobody else sees the Russians. Raimi shows up in a truck with a Confederate flag plate, which was, I guess, the universal symbol for assholery even in the 80s, apparently. And he's drinking, of course, and he wants to fight Misha. He knocks Misha down, then he takes Danny out, which sends Misha into a rage, and he beats the shit out of Raimi, just wrecks his ass while his friends watch. But before it gets too serious, the other guys decide to attack one at a time and give the kids a chance to do some cartoonish fighting moves and take out the bad guys Sergeant Slammer style. And then, the jetpack Sergeant Slammer guy appears from literally no place, just rises up above this alley where 3 guys are unconscious on the ground, and 3 kids and an adult man are standing over them. There's no way he saw any of the fight that just happened, but he hovers and says, "Good job, men," like he completely approves of the smackdown that just happened. Lest we forget, this is a movie for children. They head for Chekhov's yacht, but then something unexpected. The boat leaves. It leaves. The kids are shouting and chasing it, but it's gone. The owners don't even acknowledge that the kids are there. I guess no one thought to check whether the people who actually own the boat would want to use it that night. The kids fight and call each other homo again. Man, the 80s were rough. So now they have to figure out what to do without the big nice boat to take to Cuba. The Russians finally arrive. Misha is super hyped to see them, and the kids are instantly suspicious, which proves to be a good instinct. They find out the Russian ship isn't gone, it's just offshore, and they don't need a whole-ass yacht to go meet that boat. Jason and Adam go to get Adam's dad's boat, leaving Danny there to stand in an uncomfortable line with the Russians. What is this blocking? Anyway, they tie him up because they want to go get the device that they came for, which is on base, under guard. Danny, by the way, puts up no fight as they tie him. He just yells in typical Danny fashion, which they ignore in typical everyone else fashion. Adam's dad sees the boys taking his boat, and Danny's dad says it's the Russians, which... What? Did that look like Russians? I see two boys, one of whom is African American, and the scene is lit well enough for him to have seen that too. But whatever. The Russians trying to break onto the base goes about as well as you might expect. They have bolt cutters and a couple of guns against a whole-ass base with an electric fence. Alarms go off, dogs are barking, and holy shit, the guards just open fire in the direction of what has to look to them like Florida retirees in polos and slacks. How do they know it wasn't just some lost golfers looking for help? I know everyone's all jumpy about Russians being on the island, but come the fuck on! Anyway, now the military is kicking off with Raimi at the helm. Sounds like a great plan. The parents drive so slowly, heading toward the base, but still manage to rear-end each other when Diane sees Misha and, screams his name, causing the dad to slam the brakes. The Russians get back to the boys, who are super pissed about Danny being tied up, but Misha says, "Hey, we're friends, but other people are stupid," which is accurate. The Russians take Adam and Jason, but they leave Danny, so Misha unties Danny and is like, "Go get help and save us, I super trust you." Which... Why? Danny has been the biggest pain in the ass this whole movie and mostly hates Misha. Also, he's got serious issues that are unrelated to the whole Russian thing. Why don't the Russians either take Danny or shoot him? It makes no sense to just leave him there, except kids' movie. Diane tells the grown-ups the plot, so they're all caught up now. Raimi tries to get the Navy to give him their boats, and this is actually great. I love these Navy guys for being like, "You get no boats without paperwork, you big dumb asshole. How dare you try to repel the Russian invasion without the proper paperwork?" Raimi pouts in his Jeep and then goes and gets a little personal boat because he will not be stopped. Danny spots the Sergeant Slammer van and tries to get him to help, but the guy is shit-faced and apparently lives in the van, I guess. He's just drunk with the door partially open and all the jetpack stuff within reach of anyone who comes along. So he's definitely fired, but yes, Danny takes the jetpack, which is made of plastic and foil. It's a kids' movie. Everyone is in boats and converging in some spot in the ocean in the pitch blackness, which I have no idea how these people found each other. The ocean is big, you guys. They should not have all gotten here this fast, but whatever. Guns out, standoff. But here comes Danny, who's also found the big meeting spot in the Black Ocean immediately. And Raimi just shoots at him. He just shoots the guy in the jetpack. No further information. Danny's down, so Misha jumps in to save him, of course, and gets shot in the process. He saves Danny from the jetpack, but somehow can't swim up himself, maybe from being shot in the shoulder. The other shoulder, by the way, not the dislocated one. This guy's shoulders are both fucked. Danny's dad dives in to save Misha in this water that is really clear for nighttime. And haha, they've met before, isn't that funny? Hey, aren't you the guy I told my harrowing childhood stories to? But guess what happens next? You'll never guess, not in a million years. Well, maybe in a million years, but you'll never guess. It's a submarine. Yes, we're not here to meet the Russian ship, which I guess actually has peaced out. We're here to get fucked up by the Red October after all. This is so close to shore, I am embarrassed for the American military establishment. You could swim to the beach from here. Another big standoff. These kids are remarkably unconcerned with having guns to their heads, and Danny's dad has now become Russia's #1 fan and just makes himself a human shield. Diane will not be outdone. She jumps in the fucking water to go be a human shield too, and the rest of the parents are just kinda mildly concerned. I don't know, the stakes just feel really low here. It's meant to be a potential World War III breaking out, and it feels like they're arguing over a parking spot. God, Diane is so dumb. The traitor from before gets a visit from military police, so we can assume he's fucked. Jason's dad decides not to report the Russian sub within spitting distance of shore. And Danny's dad is, I guess, completely healed of his childhood trauma because these Russians are the nice kind.
Only wound. Wounds heal.
wounds heal. I mean, not when the wound kills your dad. Am I right? Thank you for my son. Thank you for my life. We are buddies now, and all's forgiven forever. Yay! Also, Diane gets to say goodbye, but who cares? The kids get to stand in a part of the sub that they probably shouldn't be in and take turns saying goodbye to Misha. They have cool handshakes that they just happen to know somehow, and Adam should have gotten a hug. He bonded with Misha arguably more than the others. But no, Danny gets the hug because Danny is the one who had the emotional journey of coping with his parents' divorce and a Russian invasion over the course of 2 days. But still, why does Danny hug him? They weren't close, and Danny has a dad. This isn't like you were a father to me. A big brother at best, like a foreign exchange student brother who annoys you. Anyway, everyone goes their own ways, all is fine, there's no war, hooray. Good thing since we're just a couple of years away from the total collapse of the USSR at this point. Man, it would have sucked to start a war with so little time left on the clock. But no, crisis averted, we ran out the Cold War with... success? I guess that's accurate. The entire standoff thing felt very easy, and it was definitely not traumatic. The kids don't even mind being held at gunpoint, but somehow it still has a huge impact on them. I guess because Misha made them realize that Russians are people too. So we see at the end that they've stopped wearing camo, they stopped reading comic books about graphically murdering terrorists, and they even comb their hair now. Look how nice they are. They read War and Peace and wear collared shirts. In fact, they look and act like undercover Russians. Maybe that was the real point of the story. Family drama and divorcing parents and having a grandfather gunned down by communist invaders in the 50s, none of that matters. What really counts is having a Russian best friend who can teach you to swear, give you vodka, and teach you about collared shirts. I'm sure they'll never forget Misha, so let's not think too hard about how Misha was probably debriefed and possibly disciplined for his time eating McDonald's and hanging out with American children. Seriously though, one thing this movie did well that other movies in the 80s did not do was humanize the enemy. Maybe it was because the writing was already on the wall for the future of the Cold War. Maybe it was because it's a kids' movie and we needed to teach these brats some empathy. But either way, it was a huge departure from movies like Red Dawn, which also featured underage protags. In Red Dawn, the invading forces are ruthless. They kill civilians, and most of the main cast dies fighting for the freedom of America against these seemingly unstoppable forces of evil. In Ruskies, the only shots fired are the ones Raimi fires at a jetpack, and the Russians, especially Misha, are shown as thoughtful, curious, and not super eager to kill anyone. It's almost refreshing given the culture at the time. Like I said, this movie was a big part of my childhood, even if I was the only one watching it. I don't think it holds up, at all, and I don't recommend you go watch it, but it meant something to me at one time, so here we are. Real 80s kids behaving like real 80s kids did, and the last stages of the Cold War being milked for family entertainment. Plus, of course, the jetpack. Nothing more American than that, really. Revisiting this movie was a hell of a ride for me, but I'm glad I did it. I like to think that Ruskies helped to bridge the gap between the consumerist West and the communist East, with the Americans, of course, coming out on top. It's a really good thing that the Cold War ended, and even if this movie had nothing at all to do with that, it's good to know we don't all have to live under the looming threat of nuclear war every minute of the day. Mostly. Spasiba, comrades! Thank you so much for watching, and do that like and subscribe thing down below because that is the American thing to do. See you next time for another journey into obscure childhood cinema with me, Blingles, and whatever strange movie I can dig out of the archives. You bring the vodka. I got a special shirt for this. It says, "I'm not yelling, I'm Russian." Doesn't really show up on camera though. I take my word for it, it's cute.